I'm David Clark, and they tell me I'm getting to be an old man. I've been around for a long time, but I originally was born in Brazil, actually, but my home and my family come from the island of Jamaica. And I've been in the ministry. That's my life's calling, and still am. I teach Bible class still, and retired, of course, living here in Fort Wayne as I approach, what is it again, Joe? 100 years? I was born in the hospital. 1919 was the date that I came into this world. My father was born in Jamaica, but at that time, people sent their children back to school, usually in England, to get their education. My father attended Dulwich College in London, and then from there went to Montreal, Canada, McGill University to study civil engineering. They were taking a vacation in Switzerland, and my father was one of those climbers who was trying to bag his mounting and get the top when suddenly an avalanche left him standing on the end of nowhere. And on his tummy, kind of swimming back to where he came from, God called him to missionary service, and he took a contract teaching civil engineer at Mackenzie College in the city of São Paulo, Brazil. It was a 3-year contract, which turned out to be 7, and it was there that he met the daughter of also an engineer, professor, and they were married there, and hence I was born there. My mother died before I was a year old in New York. She died of the great flu epidemic in 1920, so I was left in Jamaica with my father's parents, William Powell Clark. My grandmother was Lillian Daughtry Nee Panton. I said I grew up in my grandfather's house, and he was a judge. He was very strict. He did not mince matters. They were both really godly people, I have to say that, yes. And my father was sent back to pioneer the jungles of the unknown tribes of the Amazon. And when Indians fired their arrows, how God could stop the arrows from leaving the bow in the most amazing way. But the terms of service in the Christian and Missionary lands were 5 years. And my father made an arrangement with them that he come home to see his son every 2.5 years at his own expense. And he did. He never let me forget. And he always came, and so we kept in touch all my life. But he was over there. And I never looked at that. In fact, when my father remarried 8 years later, a missionary of the Missionary Church Association in Peru, I was reluctant to accept a mother. But I got to know her and did accept her, and she was a wonderful woman, yes. I never traveled with them, no. He was a deep thinker. He was not erratic in business. He was very, very methodical. There are 2 branches of my family that are opposites. The Clarks are erratic. The Pantons are very quiet, cool, and slowly going at it. My father was a Panton, and we had a godly heritage in that family. But he was never impulsive. He wasn't an impulsive actor. He thought his way, he knew his way. He was an engineer by training. He was able to plan architecture and things like that. I tend to be administrative, to think before I jump. I'm that type, I would say. My grandparents were beloved to me, and I had a good family of cousins and so on and all of that. I had a glorious childhood. I did not grow up near the coast. I was in the mountains, high, 2,600 feet up. I remember the buggy and horse days, certainly. And I grew up on the back of a horse. I'm as comfortable riding a horse as I was sitting in anybody's car. But I was never athletic. I played cricket. I played English football, which is known in this country as soccer. So that was not the thing of my life. But what I did love was roaming the hills and collecting eggs and carefully kept butterflies. And with the rest of my family, I kind of grew up in a cattle pen. I mean, we would talk about milking 75 head of cattle twice a day. Hired people were employed to do that. Nothing electric about that. And my horse, I had a beautiful, magnificent filly. But my grandfather said, she is just a little bit too spritey for you, little boy. So he took her away and he gave me a horse he called Trim, because his tail was trimmed and his mane was trimmed, and he was not a high-spirited horse. He could never win a agricultural. I went into exhibitions for him, but he couldn't get to first base. So, but we used to ride together, yes. We were just good friends. I was one of 8 children. My 7 sisters, but they were cousins. And they were all girls. I was the only boy. I was constantly at one of their homes. And there was one house my uncle rented, which is one of the greatest existent great houses in Jamaica, built in the time of slavery, Marlborough. It was built on the top of a mountain with a parapet all the way round, which made a level top. And we had everything there. We had cattle, we had sheep, we had a birthday party, and my uncle cleared out a big section in the middle of a forest, and the governor of Jamaica came with his family in a buggy. Don't ask me how he got invited, but he was there. So I had social contact with people. Jamaica was probably 95% black. 5% was probably white. And they don't talk about Afro-West Indian. No, they call themselves Jamaican, and they say black and brown. So I went to school with brown and yellow, black and white, yes, we were all in school together, and my daughters likewise. There was never a feeling of segregation in any way, but better educated, better class in that respect. But my grandfather and grandmother never let me conclude that they were my parents. My father was in missionary work in Brazil, and that was his calling, and that was therefore my inheritance. My dad used to say to me very plainly, son, just because your father is a missionary doesn't mean you have to be. I said, you got it right, Dad. I didn't say that out loud, but I said it inside. Well, I was in business in Kingston after my graduation from high school in Jamaica. I went into the business world, and I was trying to climb the ladder and go from one job at the lowest rung of the ladder to climb the ladder and go up a little bit. And in my home, I was really in strict, regular Christian home. When I got into my business world, it wasn't quite as good as that, you know. And yes, I was regular at church and all of that, but I was not as keen as I was. My parents, passing through, going to the United States on furlough, suggested that I go with them to get a business training. And my stepmother was from Archbold, Ohio, and she knew the great city of Fort Wayne, an international business college. So I said, yes, I'll go. If you pay the way, I'll go for 12 months, which I did. At that time, the Fort Wayne Bible Institute, in the midst of severe depression, I've often joked and said that the management desperately needed financial help, so they let me room and board in a private room for $5 a week, including breakfast and supper. I rode the streetcars of Fort Wayne for $1 a week, took my international business course, and worked at a restaurant washing dishes for my lunch. And then it so happened, while boarding at the Bible school and attending, I did attend a specific meeting I'm thinking of at the First Missionary Church, and a missionary from Nigeria, Tommy Titcomb, preached a sermon that hit me square in the eye or in the heart or wherever you want. I know I landed up on the front bench of that church, and that's when I knew God had called me to missions. But I had to finish my business course, which was good. Then I went to Jamaica for the vacation, and I bought my ticket on a ship plying between Europe and South America, Pacific Steam Navigation Company. I paid $11 for a third-class ticket. To get to that ship, I had to take a ferry from Miami to Havana. Well, the ferry was on strike, and I was told the only way you can get there is to get in line, and when you get up to the desk, buy your ticket and go to Havana. I was number 41 in line, and I saw a white uniformed man come up to me. I don't know who he was. He says, "Are you David Clark?" I said, "Yes." He says, "Come with me," and he took me right up into number 1 in the line and sold me the ticket right then on the spot and put me in the airplane, and I left for Havana. You figure that one out. Those Pan American clippers, they land on the water, and you enter it through the roof. For a hole in the roof, you climb down, about 20 passengers maybe. And when I got on the ship next morning in Havana, third class was full. So I was demoted to fourth class. And when I got to fourth class was full. There was no room except cabins below sea level, and the portholes were underwater. And the big thing about that trip was they had 240 Jewish people sleeping on the decks, third class from Fort Wayne, escaping Hitler in Europe. And I traveled with them. I couldn't speak a word, but I brought my mattress up from the depths of the bowels of the ship and put it on. There was no space on the good places, so I had to put it right in the prow of the boat in the teeth of the wind. And the significance of the 240 Jewish people did not hit me until, well, after we knew about what was happening in Europe. We didn't know at that time fully the full story. My dad was waiting for me on the docks when I got to Kingston that night. That's a miracle, really. I knew that what had happened was not ordinary, and I took it as the hand of God. I did. From that time, I really did. That was 1939. And when I was on vacation, the war broke out with the invasion of Poland. I came back and finished my business college for 2 months, October and November, because I couldn't leave Jamaica. They stopped me. I got to the immigration post and they wouldn't let me on. They said, "No, you can't go." I had to go through all kind of rigmarole to get to the United States, and when I got here, I had an immigration card that I had to go to the post office or the immigration office and register where I was every 3 months and what I was doing. But when Tommy Titcomb came and I was called to missions, and I knew it, yes. I had enrolled in Fort Wayne Bible Institute for theological training. And being in Fort Wayne Bible Institute, I signed up as a missionary for foreign service. The war was roaring. America was very isolationist. And they kept telling me that they let those British pay for us, pay for the war debts, and that's their business. And the manager of the school took a straw poll when Franklin Delano Roosevelt was running for his 4th term against a man by the name of Dewey, who was an isolationist. I was the only vote in students and faculty that voted Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And I've never been a Democrat. Almost a year later, you see, September, a new freshman class came in, and there was a girl there that everybody wowed at and decided they're going to get that girl. Well, I won. It's a long story again. We had to do practical work in school. She washed dishes and ironed clothes, and I swept the floor. And I tell you, I swept the kitchen floor very, very well that morning. I think I swept the kitchen floor no less than 6 times till I had the courage to ask when she says, "Do you know that other David Clark?" I said, "What other David Clark?" And that's what pulled us together. She was timid, quiet, methodical, but not adventurous in any way, no. We were allowed 45 minutes. We would go for a walk, usually down to Foster Park, and back home, and that's it. No fraternization was permitted. The year before I went to the school, boys went east one day if they were out, girls walked west. They were never allowed to walk out of the school in the same direction in any one given day. And they would go round the block and somehow meet 1 block back. But I didn't do that. No, I followed rules, yes, of course I did, yes. She came from Chicago. Well, I'd never even been to the city of Chicago. I heard about gangsters and all of that kind of stuff, but it was not what I was looking for, I can assure you of that. But I knew where we would be going, and when I asked her to marry me, I pointed out, we're going this direction. We're not going urban, we're going country life. You could not get married during the school year, no. You could get married between if you had permission. And I told them I would like to have this year married because from here we're going there. We were married in Humboldt Park Gospel Tabernacle, which became the first missionary church of Chicago, which became the first Spanish church. There were no cars on the streets of the United States. We've got to remember the war. The car factories had been converted to tank factories, and cars were extremely hard to get. And her father, who had lost everything in the Depression, he was hard hit. We were sitting on a piano stool while she was picking out something on the piano, and he put his arms around both of us from the back. I dropped keys in my hand. He says, "That's my Model A Ford, it's yours." Well, when we got married, we took the Model A Ford and we looked for a cabin. That's what they called motels in those days. And we thought, well, we'd find one down North Avenue. No, there weren't any on North Avenue. So we traveled on, and we came back and we found one little cabin. The man looked at me, us, and he said, "Are you married?" I said, "Yes, sir. We were just married tonight." And we had a box of Cheez-Its and a bottle of Coke each. And he said, "I'll let you in." And we stayed there for the night. Next morning was Sunday. We went back to church. right where we'd come from the day before. People were surprised to see us back, but that's what we did. So we used an apartment, you know, on Shady Court right there. While I was in Bible school, I never received 1 cent from my family. It was wartime. I couldn't. I used to walk the neighbor's dog for 45 cents an hour on Rudisill. That was what we did. I had no money. Helen's family had nothing either, so we did not have any money. But I got a job at Baker's Shoe Store down on Calhoun, and I kept my pennies and looked after them, and we did it. And I have to give credit, there was a lady in Hoagland. She was the sister of Margaret Ringenberg, the famous world aviator. Her sister, living in Hoagland, used to pay my tuition, and I thank her for it. Well, we were married 1 year, and then we went to Jamaica, and our first daughter was born in about a year after we got there. We were married in 42, she was born in 44. We figured we wanted 4 children.
How many did you have?
5. All girls. There was a war on, and that was affecting everything. I was British. I carried a British passport everywhere, and I saw my country sinking. And I was 4F, foreign alien of a friendly country. When the war got serious, I was told to register conscription. You've got to report right away to Fort Perry in Ohio. And I said, well, I'm due to leave the country by my immigration rules. I have to leave by July. They said, then leave, go. And so my wife and I set off to go in a blacked out seaplane to Jamaica. We couldn't see outside when we were over land. No, we couldn't see anything like that. They wouldn't let you see the harbor below because Jamaica was a main place for convoys to assemble. A lot of German submarines were out there. So we went back, but I had signed up to go as a missionary when the war was over. So the missionary church said, well, spend your 2 years practical experience time in Jamaica. So as soon as I arrived in Jamaica, they made me a pastor of a church, and I didn't even know how to preach. We were at the Devon Church in September the 1st for 2 years. Those wonderful people, they taught me how to be a pastor, and I was something like that for 2 years. I traced out every war move, and D-Day, I was in Jamaica, yes. I don't know particularly that there was any celebration. There were no cars in Jamaica during the war. People took the engines out and put 2 shafts on and put a horse to draw the car. And we had to get rationing tickets. I had 1 gallon per month, 1 gallon, but every time I had a funeral, I got another gallon. Agriculture was life-supporting. Imported food wasn't there. My uncles in farms, one uncle in particular, he had his cattle farm. He had to produce milk and beef. Production of milk and beef is important to live, so he got 7 gallons per month. He gave me 1. Other times we had to go to Kingston and apply personally to what was known as the competent authority to see if we could get a gallon or 2, but there was none. The church was allowed 1 pint of kerosene oil per month. 1 pint for lamp lighting. And I stripped an old barn of electric wires and wired the church and the house with these old sockets and things like that. And I bought, believe it, a German generator, and gasoline was allowed for generating power. And we got light in the church before the war was over. So when the war ended, everybody looked forward to relief. And we went to the Dominican Republic for 3 years. And the lady at that Devon church where I had been, She gave me the biggest hug and she said, "You've got to come back. We want you." She said, "You're coming back because I know you're coming back. God says so." We didn't have any electricity there. The capital city blacked out all night long. There was no water running in the capital city, which was known as Ciudad Trujillo in those days, now Santo Domingo. There was no water running during the night, and there was no light during the night. Absolute pioneer with no churches. The area of the country was the frontier with Haiti, and it was colonized by convicts. So the barber who cut my hair was a convict, and everybody that you worked with were convicts, but they were all decent people. But your life was in danger from dictatorship. Couldn't talk. You didn't know who was a spy. I was told when I went there, if you see a dead person on the road, ask no questions, walk around. There were two English-speaking Dominicans. One was the head of the Public Works Department, and he was always running trucks, and he gave us free rides in his truck. We had no car, nothing. And there was a major of the army. He spoke English, and so did the Public Works. Both were spies. Both just ditched us suddenly, and they had been watching us all the time. So we thanked them for the ride, but never answer their questions about the president, who was assassinated later. It was frightening. As soon as we landed on a little 8-seater, the daily newspaper was taken out of my hands right away. We learned from day one, don't talk. We got along all right. Yes, we got along all right. We had thatch-roofed houses, that's all. Just a square with a cross between it, so it makes 4 compartments. And get water from the river and send your laundry to the river. It was really back end of the country. This capital city was a showcase because of the president, and the houses were always painted in the front, but never the back. But in the country, you just existed, that's all. They were very friendly, except for the priest. He told the water boys to leave us alone, not sell us any water. And the water was cut off, our drinking water, our bath water, cut off completely. And they told me, we can't sell it to you because the priest is forbidden. Well, I went up to the center of town and I met the priest and I said, "Pardon me, sir, I just want to tell you that the boys say that you told them." "Oh, no, 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 I would never do that." Well, I said, "I'd be very happy if you let them come back." And I had more boys offering to sell me water before night than I'd had ever before. Having said that, we saw no progress whatsoever. What little Spanish I knew, I tried. I never saw any convert. But years later, when the Loma Church was being rebuilt, people remembered me when I was there and asked for me. One of them, who's some of the cabinet work I have here in my house, he was a cabinet maker. He'd given his heart to the Lord, but he didn't come out. No, not at all. So we didn't see any progress. I left for furlough with every intention to go back, except that we were in negotiation relative to the transfer to Jamaica, with the Alliance on one side trying to give over this work in Jamaica to the missionary church, because they had nothing in there at all. I was offered $120 a month flat rate, never to be raised. I said, "That's impossible." And they accepted me and supported me as a normal missionary after that. So after 3 years, I went back to the States and went back to Jamaica and introduced the association and began to weave there were a total maybe of about 10 little churches, 10 churches, together, and to make the denomination of the Missionary Church Association in Jamaica. Coordination of a bunch of loose churches getting them established individually and coordinating them into a workable denomination, and at the same time planting and pastoring the churches that I planted. I was left holding the baby on 2 occasions. It was all country work, and then later on I went to Kingston, but from Kingston I was always island-wide ministry, yet pastoring a church at the same time. My Fort Wayne Bible School training was of little consequence. I was never taught pastoral theology, never. So I didn't know how to make a sermon, much less preach one. But the International Business College helped my administration because I am an administrator. Administrator, church planter. It's still my passion, and I'm still doing it. When we went to Kingston, Judy was born. That's number 4. I was asked to go to the old established church, which my father had helped to found when he lost his wife and he spent one day at home with his baby. He helped found a church in Kingston. I went to that church and we stayed in the parsonage, which wasn't particularly a good house in any way, but it sufficed for the time. And while there, a church was born in the living room. And then I just walked around the community looking around, and I saw for sale. And I looked in and wandered around, just bush and an old house. And I left it. Then I went back sometime later, and the gardener or caretaker or somebody was in there. He says, "Go further in, sir. Go into the bush, because it's deeper." And I went deeper in, and I found over an acre of a land. And he said, "The house is good." And I answered the ad hanging on the gate of the salesman. And he said, "They want £5,500. They're living in New York. They're absentee. But the school behind, the girls' school behind, has first option." I said, "Send them a telegram, offer them 5,000. Got an answer the next day. He says, "Your offer has been received." I said, "What about the school?" School says they don't want it. And that's the school all my girls went to. All of them graduated there. Queen's School. I was pastoring Grace Church in Kingston. All the people in front of me were black. One blonde woman came in, very beautiful woman. Everybody saw her. She said she had been converted by listening to Billy Graham on the radio. Her husband was in business building a new seaport, and he invited me to come to the seaport opening, and the great ocean liner named the United States was the first ship to come and dock. And I was given a ringside seat, and something happened that the public didn't know, but the great United States hit bottom and churned up tons of mud. She was backed off, nothing happened, nobody knew. But then I was invited to the office upstairs, and I was absolutely shocked. He says, "This is our plan." They were going to fill up a whole miles and miles of swamp and build for a population of 100,000 people. And he had a map, all kind of maps. I said, "Is there anything I could get a chance to get in there?" He said, "Go and ask the boss." Jewish people. And I went in to Mr. Moses Matalon, and he said, "Yes, I'll let you have a lot. You go on your furlough." I was just about to leave for furlough. "Next year we'll talk, because it's all salt water now. There's no land there." Was that a brush off? Or it wasn't. When I went back, he remembered me, welcomed me. He says, "Yes, you've got your land ready." And out in no man's land, just sandwiched and been built out of a swamp. It's Portmore, what is now over 300,000 people. I chose a lot, that's a long story. Now there are 3 churches in there, but that church that I got from them that day, that church is the biggest church in Jamaica. My wife was a very, very good partner in missionary work. She did a super job. The currency there was pounds, shillings, pence, halfpennies, farthings, florins, all of that English money. And we went to a children's camp. She was made the treasurer. And she didn't know what these coins were. But she learned, and at the same time, she would teach big classes right up to when she was expecting one of the children. She was surrounded by a whole lot of children right in the middle of the church, no classroom. She was very faithful in her teaching. And I found her notes that she had taught a Bible class in Jamaica on Daniel. Now that's deep thinking. Well, I found the notes stashed away, and I untied it, and I found her textbook was Dr. Ironside of Moody, and the book was published in 1901. And she did it, and she did it in Bern also. She got over being timid. That definitely so. She was very confident of what she was doing. She wasn't a public speaker. She found home assignment difficult because she had to get up on the pulpit. She didn't like that kind of thing, no. You know, when we went to Jamaica, she thought she had fallen off the end of the world. I don't think she knew anything about farming or mountains or anything like that, but she became very at home there. That's where our family was raised. The first 2 came within two years. The third one, we planned it for furlough. Helen was touring the United States with me, and we did not want any children while we were on that year. So between 3 and 4, there was 8 years. And between 4 and 5, there was 6 years. Grace was born while we were in the Dominican Republic, in very primitive conditions, I can assure you. But we went into a politician's clinic and she had good treatment. Barbara was born on furlough in Chicago. The rest were born in Jamaica, all in the same hospital. I enjoyed and loved my girls. I enjoyed raising them, yes. And we were right beside the school, and half of the school seemed to come into our house to get their lunch or to get anything they needed. They had brought in more friends through the fence, and we just loved to have the girls around us. Yes, we did. Everyone is different to the other. The first girl, Eileen, was a brain. She graduated from Fort Wayne Bible College with a grade point average of 4.12, summa cum laude. She was always a brain. The second girl came on, Grace. If she got a D, she was lucky. She was not a brain. She was a scatterbrain. And she was in for fun. Why, Eileen would measure her time by the minute. The second girl floated along merrily and got into all kinds of troubles, but she turned out to be a wonderful woman. She spent a lot of time at the organ on Sundays. When she came to Fort Wayne Bible College, her music teacher said she is no good. She couldn't read any music, and he gave up on her because she couldn't do the music the right way. But she loved music, and she always did. Barbara she was more like Grace. She came to Bible school for a while, and then got married back in Jamaica, married an Englishman, and kind of went off to his business in England and so on. Then Judy came along 8 years later, and she was Miss Perfection. She gave us no trouble. She's always methodical. There's a saying in Jamaica, and it goes like this: Talawa. You won't understand that. They refer to an ant. It's a little insect, but its bite is strong. And Joanne comes along, and she's a homebody. She was a postscript. We planned for 4, God gave us 5. She's not like any of them either. So we have 5 different girls. But life went on just exactly the same. Yes, we had rough times. There were times that things didn't always go like we wanted them to go, but you go right along, yes? They've all gone through their problems and you've hurt with them. Then when they recover from their problems, you are overjoyed. Now, when they bring their children, you love them and like to see them go. You know what I mean? Yes. They're all young and you know what's going to happen. You know what they're going to go through, and you expect them to go through problems, but you boost them along. You love them while they're here, and you love them when they go, and you're glad. But that's how it is. When you get to be 100, that happens. When I left Jamaica, I assumed that was the end. My daughters were here. And they said, Dad, you'll never know your grandchildren unless you come and see them. I turned over the organization to a full-time president, national. The missionary church cut the cords right away and let the ship go, and the ship's still sailing and growing. It's maintained its name, the Missionary Church Association in Jamaica. But they never cut me off. They kept in touch with me. I never pastored a church in the United States. I didn't know how. And yet I went to West Missionary Church in Bern for 5 years. They couldn't understand my accent. At the end of it, I had a church full of friends. I had a wonderful time. And I told them, I said, well, at least you have learned to understand English, even if you can't speak it. I look back at my life as a series of miracles. I have to admit that word, a series of unusual happenings. I learned at that church that church life in the United States is very different from church life in another country. And my passion was to go back, plant. When we retired, Helen was the one who kept the books. I never touched the money. She did all the accounting, all of that. She says we'll be bankrupt in 1 year. I said, no, we won't. We'll keep going, no matter what. Well, I made a vow to the Lord, which I've stood by. I said to God orally, Lord, if you open a door, any door, I promise I will go through it as long as I know you opened the door. And I had a telephone call within 2 weeks from Jamaica asking me to come down there to give a new church plant a push. When I got down there, all kinds of things happened, but the church didn't need a push start and is a good church today. A terrible accident took place. My cousin, in whose house I was staying, had been hit in the head with a large rock. His head was fractured, he was nearly dead. And the place was up for sale and I didn't know it. I had no idea. But he was in hospital and I was looking after 3 little children, babysitting them. I read from the book of Judges, what are you doing in this place? Why are you here? Who called you here? What are you doing in this place? Completely out of context. It hit me. And I said to the Lord, why am I here? Because you sent me. I thought, what are you doing in this place? And I said, this is oral, orally talking to God. I said, I'm babysitting 3 children. What are you doing in this place? I said, Lord, I don't know. I don't know what I'm doing. But the telephone rang. A bishop of a church said, "I want to see this place. It's up for sale." Well, nobody knew that it was for sale. I said, "I don't know that this place is for sale." He said, "Yes, it is." Well, I said, "You can come." And I showed him everything that's bad about the place. Everything was good about the place. I showed him everything. And then we sat down and I talked to the bishop and said, with his deacons. I said, "What do you want this place for?" He said, "We want it for a camp and conference center." And I said, "Oh, this will be ideal for that." But I didn't tell him out loud, but I said it to myself, "But you're not the only one looking for it." God said, "This is it." And Kendall Camp and Conference Center grew out of that totally miraculously. You see, all of these things happen, people would say by chance, but there is no chance. There's no coincidence in God's plan. And I have been planting churches or desiring to plant churches ever since. And I'm doing so now. I'm going to Jamaica next month, April, for the planting of a new church that I'm helping them do. And it just goes on. God has opened the way and I'm going. So when he opened the door at Kendall, it turned out to be 20 years of work. The first year was an inspection year by the headquarters men, David Manners, and they said, yes, this would be a good place. The second year, that was 1988. 89 was the first year we took 4 teams down from Bern, Indiana. And then Fellowship Church got involved at that time and right after. The idea, the missionary church was already involved in sending children to camp. Jamaican kids, yes. We couldn't find a place. They voted to buy a given property. We knew the property. They said, we'll buy it. I didn't think it was right, but what do you do if they override? And they bought it. They were going to buy it. I knew they wouldn't have a chance to buy it. But they never even raised a down payment until Kendall opened up in a very unusual matter. And the funds came from everywhere, and it's still coming and still going. It started out with the Germans saying that this house has to be preserved. And we preserved the old house. And that is the centerpiece still. We aimed at a children's camp. And I drew the sketches on the site plan, small little chapel, 2 little dorms, and well, before long, more people wanted to come, big people asking if they could book. There was more demand for adult. Then we built on the foundations of office storerooms and junk like that. We built a 2-floor dormitory room with 4 rooms up, 4 rooms down, each room with a bathroom. So when you get each room with a bathroom, boy, you're gone into the conference right away, you see. And that proved to be in demand. We have a girls' dorm with a community bathroom. We have a boys' dorm with a community bathroom for the younger generations and for anybody, singles, anybody. We also have 2 of these buildings that are double floors, 2 floors with private bathrooms and everything. Then we have what started out with a small chapel. We thought a little 25 by 60 building would be all right. Started with a man from Goshen, Indiana, who went on a trip, I think it was to Mexico. He asked the leader, he said, I want to find a way where I can save paying so much income tax on my work. While he was a builder, he sold steel frame factory buildings. The team leader said, well, if you gave one of these steel buildings, it's all tax deductible. You would save a lot of income tax. We made an appointment to take him down to Jamaica. He hesitated and he hummed and hawed, but he went. I'll give half. Instead of full cost, I'll give you 50% cost. I will pay my own workers here in Goshen full salary to go to Jamaica and erect it free of cost. Just a frame, not the building, nothing else, just steel, that's all. I went up to Goshen, he showed me this and he showed me that. Here was one that we could get 85 feet wide and 125 feet long. I said, let's get it. We thought a lot about shrinking that size, but we went for it. But the going down, taking that steel building down, went through so many changes. The railroad refused to take it from the factory as was packed. They had to repack the whole thing in Missouri, in St. Louis, Missouri, because the train wouldn't take it. So instead of one big truck on the train, we had two trucks. That's double the price. And they paid for it. The builder, the manufacturers paid for that. Meantime, the shipping doubled, so we had twice as much train, twice as much ocean freight, and it went on, and it developed, and it became the auditorium there now that seats 1,600 people. And they want to enlarge it, but they can't enlarge it. So over the years, it has become a major conference center with church bookings, organizational bookings, weddings in the auditorium, big-time weddings, big-time funerals, and the camp buildings for local churches or denominations. But every summer, there's a certain block of weeks that the missionary church automatically sends children to keep that original unchurched children, getting them in. They're there every summer, but it has morphed into bigger and bigger all the time. And as of today, the government, the tourist industry of the country, has spotted the camp, and they said, we are hoping to get the railroads started again as a tourist attraction, which I don't think will come to pass, but more likely they'll use the old train track for a highway bed. One of the two will develop. They said, we want to promote your camp for foreign Christian groups, tourist religious groups. So we're trying to upgrade at this moment, buying back some of the land that we sold off and slowly but surely improve what is there. It just goes on. 2.5 years ago, my wife died. The doctor said just old age. She was mentally alert, maybe beginning to not quite be as sharp in memory, but she would wheel herself into the dining room 3 times a day for her food. She would attend every chapel service that there was, every public service that there was in the nursing home. And one day she just went to sleep and didn't wake up. She slept for 10 days. I knew she was dying. I knew she would never come out of that nursing home. She would ask me to pray that I die. I just want to go to sleep and die. I said, I will never do that. I could never do that. But she did go to sleep and die. And I knew for 10 days while she was sleeping that she was not going to wake up. So when she actually passed away, it wasn't as if somebody dropped dead of a heart attack. I was expecting it, but I can tell you, I have missed her an awful lot in the house. Although she was not in the house for at least 4 years before she died, I miss my wife very much. I want to thank God for permitting me to keep going, for one. That's important. As for my books, all that genealogy has come to an end. Now, I have nothing to do. I sit in my chair where you see me, and the house is empty, but I long to get out, and I would love to go back to Jamaica and plant more churches, and I visualize it, and I'm actually helping where there is possibilities, and that's one of them particularly we're going to next month. Like I say, this is where I live, in this chair. If there's nothing to do in the house, but I do work on the computer and keep in touch with Jamaica by emails and so forth. And now we're planning this. Me and two of the girls are going. I have seen tremendous coincidences, no. The hand of God moving, yes. It just goes on.
As of this moment, means this building is a David Clark auditorium to the glory of God and in the praise and honor of what God has done. He's perfect, man.